This session is to showcase the outcome of the UNESCO West Bengal Fund and Trust project, the Rural Craft Cultural Hub. We have Mrs. Ananya Bhattacharya as a speaker, who is the director of the banglanatak.com, and Mr. Deva, please let me pronounce correctly your name. Debanjan Chakrabarti, who is director of the British Council North and Northeast branch of India. And then I myself, Junyi Han, I'm heading the culture sector at the UNESCO New Delhi. Before giving the floor to Ananya, I'd like to maybe make a short introduction on the discourse of international levels, the culture and development. As we all know, culture has recently moved to center stage as an important aspect of development, occupying the agenda not only of UNESCO, but of many international organizations working in the area of development, notably World Bank. Currently, the emphasis on a possible symbiosis between culture and development has far-reaching implications and presents one of the greatest challenges for all of us to rethink the paradigm of development. In the global context, culture is now understood as both a resistant and a resilient forces. More broadly, culture is currently perceived not only as facilitator of the economy, but also, most importantly, individual and collective well-being of society as a whole. It is therefore identified as an essential social capital. UNESCO, indeed, is the first international agency which advocated culture as driving forces for development. Through the World Conference on Cultural Policies held in Mexico in 1982, being convinced that no development could be sustainable without a strong cultural component, and only a human-centered approach to development can lead to lasting, inclusive, and equitable result. Indeed, this Mexico conference was a landmark which not only reaffirmed that man is origin and the goal of development, hence important to humanize development process, but also redefined culture as something which goes far beyond monument and site by including rich beliefs, cultural expressions, folklore, and acknowledged them as driving force for economic development. Since then, UNESCO has been striving to advocate it at the international level, and the international community has gradually seen the shift of paradigm to recognize cultural heritage as both engine and catalyst of socio-economic development. And finally, after 30 years of the UNESCO Mexico Conference, 2012, the UN Conference on Sustainable Development acknowledged culture as a driving force for sustainable development and made a number of specific references to the role of culture for sustainable development in its outcome document Rio +20. For example, I can just give just one short example. The text acknowledges that the creativity sector, which is closely connected with our tangible and intangible heritage through a cultural continuum, stands as a driver of inclusive economic and social development by adding value to economic activities relating to culture, such as architecture, the arts, crafts, design, fashion, and film, even music. So India is one of the best placed countries in the world to operationalize this concept to showcase culture as driving forces for development. And I'm very pleased to introduce the project Rural Craft Cultural Hubs as one of the most exemplary project to showcase this intrinsic the relationship between culture and development. So we have now Mrs. Bhattacharya, who will introduce you what was the most exciting and also challenging the experience that we have gone so far in implementing this very innovative, may I say, the project. Please, Ananya.
Good afternoon, নমস্কার আমিও একটু বাংলা আর ইংরেজি দুটো মিশিয়েই বলবো যাতে আমাদের সবাই বুঝতে পারে so today I'm going to broadly outline what we did in the past few years. What was the process we followed in this project, what were the strategies we used and what were the outcomes. আমরা গত কয়েক বছর ধরে শিল্পীদের সাথে যে কাজটা করলাম সেটারই কথা আজকে আমি বলবো. Broadly, there are three things we'll talk about: the rural craft and cultural hubs, how they are doing today, what are the strategies and the process. Now, in the morning you heard that the priority, as also from World Bank is shared, the priority is to shift the rural poor out of poverty. And that was also the basic objective of our project, that how can we foster pro-poor growth. And when we were looking for these strategies, we realized that these people, though they were not literate, though they were not going to school, they were rich in a wonderful skill of traditional knowledge, skills, oral traditions, philosophies, craftsmanship. আমরা যখন প্রথম কাজ শুরু করলাম আমরা দেখলাম যে আমাদের এই যারা গ্রামে আছে যারা গরিব মানুষ যারা হয়তো স্কুলে যায়নি কিন্তু তারা এত অপূর্ব তাদের মধ্যে শিল্পকলার যে দক্ষতা সেই দক্ষতাটা নিয়ে আমরা কি করে এগোতে পারি. So what has happened today, the partnership with UNESCO, as it was shared, it started in 2013, and after that first the work was done with 3,000 craftsmen and then with 12,000 more performing artists and craftsmen. And West Bengal Khadi, they supported the replication with the natural fiber and the weaving traditions. So today, there are across 19 districts what we call rural craft and cultural hubs, covering 24,300 families, and you see the statistics on screen. Now, of these families, 30% are from what we call scheduled caste, another 30% are from the other backward classes, around 20% are from scheduled tribes, 10% are minority, and around 67% of craftsmen are women, and among performing artists, around 22% are women. So you see that among this large group we are working with, most of them are from what we call marginalized communities. So you understand that was really the focus of the project, that how we can leverage the skills of these communities. What has happened today? Around 25 plus art forms are thriving. 25-এরও বেশি লোকগান, লোকনৃত্য, হস্তশিল্প এই সমস্তগুলো এখন অনেক উজ্জীবিত হয়ে গেছে এবং তারা সারা বছর আপনাদের দক্ষতা থেকে রোজগার করছেন. So they are earning from their art form throughout the year. Initially it was just during the festive season. আগে শুধু মেলার সময় হতো. But now people are coming into villages, they have direct market linkages and they are getting commissioned orders. So what has happened? Average, there is an increase in income of 2 to 2.5 times for all these people. But if we think of those who are leading, it's more than 10 times income what they're enjoying. কাজে এখন মাসিক রোজগার প্রায় 2.5 গুণ অনেকেরই বেড়ে গেছে. And there is direct market linkage. So as Amitav also shared, that focus was capacity building, market linkage, and developing new innovations, new audiences, new markets. So more than 150 persons have traveled internationally. যারা পিছনে বসে আছেন কারা বিদেশে গেছেন একটু হাত তুলুন তো. So you see so many of them, they have traveled internationally. And yes. And they have taken our craft and art abroad, and that has created new audiences. And all of them who are here, they have traveled across the country. Apnara shobai desher nanan melaye gechen, and 1,000+ people have been there. As a result, what has happened due to the development of these hubs, migration has reduced. Honorable Minister Sir already discussed that. The new things which have emerged from the crafts, you will see some exhibited outside, and I invite all of you to go in the lunch break to the Quorum Hall upstairs in the second floor, where the artists are there with their crafts, and see how their transition has happened. As 60% were women and who are now traveling nationally and internationally, and believe me, before this project, they did not travel. They did not move out of the village. So that itself gave them a lot of confidence, and as they have started earning, they have been linked to various government schemes. They're enjoying credit, and they're doing business, and they're enjoying improved social status, say in the family, in the community. And overall, I'll share in my next few slides how the entire community is energized. Juni was also talking about UNESCO's mandate on linking culture to developmental goals. Some of the developmental goals which have been achieved in this project are poverty alleviation. With improvement in income, these people have moved out of poverty. Gender equality, I already shared how women are empowered. Now, as people have traveled, as they've seen the world, they have started taking ownership of other developmental goals. When we started, 80 to 90% of the villagers we were working with did not have a toilet at home. Today, that percentage, you see, there has been a huge positive improvement. You see the figures there, I'm not going to read them off, but most of them have installed toilets. All of them, almost all of them have bank accounts. There is overall improvement in the village environment. I'll share more on that. And they have realized the value of education. So while the generation we started working with, they had been hardly to primary school, the young generation, they are completing school education, and some are also stepping into college. In the SDG goal of 8, we have about revitalizing the cultural heritage of an area, and as you see, with 25+ art forms revitalized, that goal is of course achieved, and SDG 11, and in SDG 8 there is greater access to decent work. So many sustainable development goals have been addressed in this project. Now, when we are talking of going abroad, it is not necessarily just about performance. So this is another thing we have learned from this project. যখন আমরা বাইরে যাচ্ছি আমরা শুধু পারফর্ম করছি তা না, আমরা কর্মশালাও করছি। And what is that? That is a wonderful exchange of art and craft traditions with other communities. So here in the picture you are seeing Tajkira. Is Tajkira here? I think Tajkira is upstairs in a stall. So Tajkira did a 3-week design residency program for French designers. So that is the level of achievement she has achieved. So she is running today a cluster of 300+ women. She is going abroad and doing conducting residencies. So even Shorno Chitrokar, she has been to Grinnell in US and conducted a residency. So they are actually teaching people. So that is another role which they're doing. We have Moushumi here. There is this young girl, Moushumi. She is right behind you. So Moushumi is the first Chow dancer in her community, and now she is leading a Chow dance group, and she is doing masters. So she is pursuing college education. While in Purulia, as you know, that's the most backward district with very low literacy. So their generation is transforming. So what this project has really done is brought about transformation. So now we go into the process part of it. We followed what we call Art for Life model, a Bangla Nataks model, which we innovated since 2004. And I'm very happy to share you that we have been awarded this year the International Award for Good Practice by the GNU Award for Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. And we'll be receiving that award formally on 26th of September this year. So this has been now recognized as an international good practice. So when we do Art for Life first, it does not only talk about art. There was in the morning this discourse that let's not fix it, right? So let's not just focus on art, but we also focus on the artist. And we go even beyond that. We also focus on the village where the artist stays. And that is where I think the crux of this model, which creates this rural transformation. So for safeguarding art, we document the art, we do inventorying, we do heritage awareness program. For empowering the artists, we strengthen the skill transmission, we empower them with new skills. And what we do for turning the village into a cultural destination is what I'm going to share soon. Now, what is cultural mapping and inventorying? So often when we do research, from a research perspective, we often focus on the art form's history, the art form's elements, the art form's nuances and all that. But another thing which we focus in our work is to get the community participate. And with them, we inventory their art form. So it's not that some outsider goes and does the documentation or does the listing, but it's the artists who themselves, and I'll share what has happened because of that approach. And that results in building trust, in building relationship, which are very critical. And you see here some examples where the younger people in the village, they're interviewing the older generation and learning about the art form. And the artists, they come out with the requirements, like they need to document the songs, they need to document the process and things like that. And two critical components which we'll discuss more and more in the other sessions are getting the community consent on what is to be documented and ensuring that after the documentation and inventorying process is done, they have access to it. So these are certain things we ensured in our artist village model. So first step, as I said, community participation was a cornerstone. আমরা যখন প্রথম কাজ শুরু করি সবার আগে যেটা করতে হয় শিল্পী কমিউনিটির সাথে তাদের নিয়ে একসাথে পথ চলতে হয় কারণ তাদের আগ্রহ তাদের পার্টিসিপেশন সবচেয়ে দরকার। So what we do after mapping the art forms and after the preliminary study, which we call the knowledge, attitude, practice study. Knowledge means what is known about the art form. Attitude is what the community thinks about increasing the sustainability and viability of the art form. And practice is what they're doing at that point. We do participatory planning sessions. So you see, this was in 2017 where all these artists, they came together and at that point again they learned from each other. So we open up the art forms to each other. So that is another thing we do. It's not that a dance, a craft and a music will operate in silo because in our real life they're all very much together. So that's what we do in our first consultation workshop with the artists where we develop the roadmap. তাহলে আপনাদের সবাইকে আপনাদের মনে আছে নিশ্চয়ই যে আমরা ডেকেছিলাম এবং একসাথে বসে আমরা প্ল্যান করেছিলাম যে কি ট্রেনিং দরকার সো আই এম জাস্ট শেয়ারিং দ্যাট উইথ দেম সো দিস এগেইন helps in making the participation of the community, formalizing the participation of the community. So in this project we have done enormous documentation. All the craft processes have got documented. 1,800 plus folk songs have got documented. In Darjeeling, there are 16 indigenous communities, and each of them, they will share later how each of them helped us to document their traditions, how they reviewed the documentation, how they gave their feedback, and then only the things were disseminated. So enormous amount of documentation work was done. Now this inventorying, mapping, documentation process actually gives us strategies for revival. So when we are working with Katha, we found this wonderful tradition of Shujni Katha, or Nokshi Katha, where they do stories. And it's very intricate and it takes a long time to do those Kathas. For those who are not from Bengal, it's a quilting technique where the women used to stitch together old cloth with run stitch and they stitch their stories there. And it's all simple run stitch, but you see how intricate the stitches are, and we realize that these are all lost. And what we see in market today as Katha is a plain run stitch, not these difficult nuances of run stage. So we worked with them to revive. So unless we involved and engaged them, because then they said, "Janen amar maar ekta kora ache dekhben." They showed what their mother had done from them and brought it out. They did things like that. And so the documentation process made us realize that what can be achieved out of this tradition. Same with Patachitra. When we started with Patachitra, there were only around 20 artists. And they were no longer using natural color. But then there was these old men and women in the village, the Khusham Rani, who shared how they made natural color. And we documented that color making process again with them. So we actually created these sheets and asked them to revive. We had, and only 2 or 3 knew the songs. So we had classes on songs. Ganer class holo, purono akar tradition gulo holo. And what happens today, if you go to that village, some of you have been there already. It's a thriving village of 60 families of painters who are doing well, and they did not even earn 500 rupees 15 years back. And yesterday we were doing a workshop and we asked them, and now we are taking them to the next level where with our partners from Coventry, we are talking about how they can use digital marketing and promotion, and they set a target of 2 lakh per month as their income, vision for future income. And we said very few people in India will say that. So you see, the community's aspirations grow because they can see that how their art is empowering them. Now, in this whole process, the next critical part after this documentation, mapping, inventorying is the skill transmission part. Now, traditionally, our country had Guru Shishya Parampara. Amader deshe ki hoto guruder theke shishora shikten. Kintu shei সুযোগটা হারিয়ে যাচ্ছিল, সময়ের সাথে যুগের সাথে হারিয়ে যাচ্ছিল। So what we tried is to recreate that, and I'll show you a short video just to create this understanding of how intense this training was. And we have some of our gurus here, and they really took the community once more through the process. So here is a view of the Baul workshop. Not only singing, it's all about a practice, a way of life. So they started in the training also the yoga, the breathing, and all those parts, and philosophies. So as part of the training program, they did the Prabhati. You will see the Guru singing. So he is here, right here, pichonei boshe achen. Sound.
দেখো আর তো নিশি না আলো জয় রাখে জেগে দেখো আর তো নিশি না
We have this tradition of roaming around and singing. So this is the morning walk. Then about learning new songs. More than 17,000 people have gone through this process, and these are the musical instrument training. So what has happened for folk traditions across the country, the opportunity to learn is lost. So what we recreated is that opportunity. Okay, I'll just break here and go back. The result, what has happened today, is there is a structured curriculum for all these traditions. So you see this city, it's a curriculum for Bhawaiya, which is a tradition of North Bengal. So through the workshops, the communities themselves worked at it. You and me can never as outsider do this. So আপনারাই নিজেরা এগুলো আপনাদের কর্মশালা থেকে বার করেছেন এবং যারা ভাওয়াইয়ার এখানে আছেন একটু হাত তুলুন। হ্যাঁ, they are from North Bengal and they have developed this curriculum and they are now running schools in their villages where they are following this curriculum for the younger generation. For the crafts, a lot was about making the products marketable, finding new markets. So there were certain things they didn't know, like, you can't use colors which they typically use the holy colors for export market. So we trained them in use of natural dye, in use of azo-free color, so that, they can access foreign markets. Then they didn't know how to price. So we did business skill workshops with them. So there was not only design interventions, but all actually new skills were developed. The dhokra, they have learned new weaving techniques. So there was a very comprehensive training program, and we are thankful to the communities because at each stage, they only identified the training needs and helped us in supporting their development. So you have seen some of the products outside. I'll show you what they were. So you have seen the basketry products like this, and there are more upstairs. They're actually made by the rope makers. So they just used to make ropes and made peanuts. They didn't earn anything. And the dhokra weavers, they made these mats that side for their own use, made of jute. And they hardly got any money out of all this. But today they are making products as fantastic here, as you see here, and you'll see more outside. So there is a complete transition in the value of the product. So that is another thing which we emphasize, that what happens often in design interventions, we have this outside designer coming in, doing few very nice products, and once a designer goes off, the craftspersons are unable to do it on their own. So what we really tried is to build their own design sense, color sense, and capabilities so that they can produce these products. And we have our partners like Sasha sitting here and many others who have really helped in this making this transition to the wider markets. So after this, Sasha is now working with our natural weave and as part of their project to take them to an international level. So these are some more examples. The ordinary chai bhar jeta, the ordinary clay pot from where we have tea, that has transitioned to things like this, very beautiful decorative items. So these people stuck in the villages have no clue of the market outside. When we did that initial study, they knew that some people came and took products from them, but they did not know where they got sold. They did not know about the raw material. So, the capacity building had to cover all this. Then in a village, there are often different craft traditions together, and we also developed composite products. So these were completely new products which were not seen by the market, and it quickly fetched, new markets and new income for the artists. After the skill development, it's very important, moment we are doing innovations, moment we are bringing in new things, then what becomes important is the intellectual property rights for them. So there, now it was already shared 6 traditions. They have got the IP, they have got geographical indication and the registration processes. Starting Craftmark has certified several of them. So with these certifications, with these registrations, we are looking forward to even a better, bigger market for the crafts. Now, our artists in the course of this project only, they have traveled to 18 countries and extensively in Europe, Asia, and few to Africa. And people have also come in from other countries, and co-creation, residencies, festivals, all have led to new potential. So here you see Shadhu and Kangal, are they here? They have been invited to a festival in Sweden 3 times, and what is the crux of, sending people abroad? Of course, to support, new innovations. But the other thing is it develops leadership. So when they come back, they take new initiative in their village to rejuvenate their art form. So that's also very critical, that you select people who will become the future community leaders to take the art form to the new levels. So we have someone from Australian Embassy here. So this is a picture of the Australian indigenous community which came and danced with Purulia Chow. And then we had the mat weavers from Maldives who came in and worked with our mat weavers. So all these exchanges resulted in new innovations and new ideas. I started saying this business skill development, and our artists, they said that we need to understand what is Paytm, what is e-money, what is e-wallet. So in the last few months, we have taken the training to that level where they're able to use all these things. And so they're understanding the supply chain, they're using social media. So now each of the hubs, they have their own social media page. And we are now also trying to take it to new levels. And one thing we always targeted is to link to government schemes. So they were linked to schemes like Uddog Aadhar, the Lok Prashar Prakalpa, and the women groups, they get microcredit loans. So the women groups were linked to that. So it really dovetailing the project with a lot of other areas of work helped in scaling up the efforts. So now you have got an idea of how we empower the artists, how the art forms are thriving. Now how about the larger community? Because when you are working in rural area, it's not that everyone is a singer, everyone is a dancer. তাহলে বাকিরা যারা গায়ক, যারা শিল্পী, তারা ছাড়া বাকিদের কথাও এই প্রজেক্টে এসছে. So we targeted working with the village, and we thank WBKVIB. I can't see Mrityunjay Babu here, but we really thank Vishwajit here, them for partnering with us, because one key strategy has been building common facility centers in the village, which has become like village identity. So in each of these villages, you have these centers which are like living museums. The other strategy has been an annual village festival. So the oldest festival started in 2010 in the village of the scroll painters, and the latest was around 3 years back. So now more than 20 villages have these annual festivals. And in these festivals, there are people coming from all across. So these are the latest centers. One is in Balarampur, where what has happened now, there is, spoke about curriculum. So the center is now giving the space for classes. So every day there are classes where young people are learning about the art form. This is a center for Baul. And new folk art centers are coming up, and people are going there. We have design students coming from all across the country who go to these centers, work with the communities, and co-create design. So NIFT, NID, IICD. We have even school children coming from Madurai who has come to village these things, and this gives them exposure. So it's really a two-way nourishing. Now what has happened for cultural tourism? There's local awareness, and all these villages, সব গ্রামেই বলে যে আগে আমাদের গ্রামের কথা আশেপাশের লোকই জানতো না, কিন্তু এখন তারাও জানে, তারাও কেনে. So the villagers around us, they never came and bought or appreciated. But as a result of this folk art center, as a result of the festivals, these local people have become a big source of income. And of course, the tourists come during the festival. So each of these village festivals easily draws 15,000 people. So that's why you see the footfall, it has gone up so high for daytime visitors. And the folk art centers have room, so there people come, and this is the thing. We have followed what we call responsible tourism model. So we are very conscious about the pitfalls of tourism also. Often in our country, we make things very touristic. But in our philosophy is what is good for the community is good for the tourists. So it's not that you have to do anything extra for the tourist, but if community likes it, like each of these villages, as I shared, we have addressed the goal of sanitation and hygiene. How? Because the villagers took effort to change the village, and thanks to Khadi, we could improve on the infrastructure, on the drainage and all those components. So as a result of all these efforts, there was synergy, and today each of these has become a cultural destination. The next thing we focused on, as I shared, was heritage education. I've already shared about the programs, and outside you will find we have done graphic novels in English and Bengali for children to learn about the art form. We have created, new pedagogy methods, because these artists, they tell us that our children are not interested in studies. So we are now seeing how the art forms can be used in pedagogy in improving the quality of education. So that is the area we are working on. And so far we have been to schools in Kolkata. Their artists have been to schools in West Bengal, all across West Bengal, even to Delhi and Goa, and shared their art forms. So before I come to this last part, I'll show you one of our village festivals video, a short video again, to take you to that journey. I need help, I think. Yeah. So this is the festival in Pingla. It's the last year's festival.
মায়া জালে বদ্ধ হই মা, মায়া জালে বদ্ধ হই মা, পিজরার পাখির মতন তারিতে হবে মা তারা।
So at that time, every house of the village becomes like a stall showing their products.
দুর্গা দুর্গা তারা গো মা, দুঃখ বিলাসিনী, দুজয়া দক্ষিণে কালী, নগেন্দ্র নন্দিনী, চণ্ডী মায়ের 10 হাত 10 দিকে সাজে, ত্রিনয়ন জ্বলেছে মায়ের কপালের মাঝে। লক্ষ্মী বামে সরস্বতী, কার্তিক গণেশ, সিংহীয় সূর্যয় বিজয়া চলে মায়ের শনি। একদিন দুর্গা মায়ের হয়েছিল দয়া, ডালিম তলায় রত্ন দিল দেখাইয়া। ডালিম তলায় রত্ন কালকে তু পেল, গুজরাটের বন কেটে নগর বসালো। ভার বন্দি করে বেদ নয়ে যায় ঘরে, ফুল্লরা সুন্দরী দেখে কুড়ার
So visitors
দুয়ারে।
come and learn about the making natural color, learn about the stories. This is the inside of the resource center, which is like the museum.
পড়িয়া শুনিয়া সীমন্ত জ্ঞান মান হলো,
And when we do these international collaborations, we invite these co-productions to be showcased in the villages, and that adds to the pride of the people. So recognition, identity, pride, all these creates a cycle of empowerment, and the artists who are like daily laborers before have now really become artists who understand audiences. So these are the festivals. So it's not that we are at the end of the journey. We have accomplished a lot. So we are going to proceed with, implementing the GI part. We are focusing on digital promotion and marketing. And what we are now thinking is how to augment this value chain to cover more. Today, Honorable Minister spoke about, taking it to more than 100,000 people and to focus on enterprise. And we see the need. We see the need of having packaging groups with expertise in packaging, groups with expertise in marketing, who can, add on to our creative entrepreneurs here and take the rural craft hubs to new levels. And of course, this model can be replicated with other communities too. Folk pedagogy is about applying this art in education and improving the quality of education. So with that, I think I've given a very detailed overview of what we have done in the Rural Craft and Cultural Hub initiative. Thank you. Thank you for patience.
Thank you very much, Ananya. Now, before giving the floor to Mr. Chakraborty, discussant, I just would like to share very shortly 2 comments that I would like to share with you. The first one is that I noticed that project addressed the marginalized community. And as you know, the 2030, the SDG, they say that we should leave no one behind. Therefore, the inclusive actions in any actions to embrace the marginalized group and the minority group is very important. And the second note I made is that any inventory is made by community themselves. UNESCO strongly recommends and encourages that any inventory should be made by the community or the bearers of that art or that folklore form. Thereby, it's the point of view to understand that form of art or intangible heritage is the one from the community itself and not from the outside. So I think these 2 points are very important for us to, to understand and share. And now I'd like to invite Mr. Chakraborty. I understand the British Council also has been working in the province of Punjab. So I expect that Mr. Chakraborty also shares some of their experience. But of course, we expect that whatever your observation or comment made on the project Rural Crafts Cultural Hubs.
Thank you very much, Joni Han, for that introduction. And thank you, Bangla Natok, for creating this wonderful platform today and inviting me to comment on on Anunna's presentation. And I will take the liberty of expanding that to also comment on what has been said by the speakers in the inaugural program. Regarding British Council and Bangla Natok, we go back a long way in time. We have worked in partnership on social enterprise. We have worked, I'm really grateful for the support that Bangla Natok has given to our work in connecting with the Bengali diaspora in the UK, both from this side of Bengal and the other side. We have worked very closely on festivals. We have supported musicians, Baul musicians from here. I can see Orpon sitting here to perform in London. And we have worked on a number of crafts projects together. And it's always a great pleasure to come and talk to people and colleagues in Bangla Natok. And me and my team are absolutely inspired by the work that you do. So thank you, Amitabh, thank you, Anunna, and thank you, the entire team that you have. A lot of references were made to the art forms of Bengal, and I'm incredibly fortunate in person that I went to school in Purulia, and I had very early exposure to art forms like Chhau and Jhumur early on in my life. I subsequently taught in Shantiniketan, where I had the opportunity to interact and listen to Baul musicians and Baul discourse from up close. And very recently, just last week, I was in Bhopal visiting two outstanding museums, and Professor Chaudhary, you're here, Museum of Man and the Tribal Museum of in Bhopal. The Tribal Museum in particular, I was supremely impressed with the kind of arts and crafts that have been displayed, especially Dokra and a whole range of metal works that come from indigenous tribes of India. Absolutely startling. Mr. Ahmed Eveda, you spoke about linking tourism to the work that we do, that players in the economic development, cultural development sphere do, and I will comment very briefly on that too. Alapon Babu mentioned very interestingly the risk of anthropologizing and romanticizing all of this work, and I found that very, very interesting from my own kind of academic background. Dr. Mitro mentioned the role of communication and marketing and skills. I hope I'll touch upon that a little bit. Anunna, you mentioned about documentation and mapping of the components that go on to make culture and creative industries, and I think your comments, ma'am, are very, very appropriate in that they must come from the communities themselves, and not just their involvement or buy-in, but they should be producing those documentation and be at the forefront of that project to create those archives. Now, just to give a bit of a macro picture on this whole space of culture and development, and I will use the word creative economy rather than culture because I find culture too amorphous and nebulous a term. We have just conducted a research. Arts Council of England has published this research just last week, which gives some facts on creative industries globally. So in the last 20 years, it's been estimated that the total worth of the creative industries in the world is to the tune of $2,250 billion. It's created 30 million jobs across the world. In the UK alone, cultural sector has grown by 30% from 2011. There are over 150 festivals that take place across various cities and villages of the UK. In India, the creative industries has grown by over 17% since 2017, and given the kind of economic discourse that we are listening in the media, this figure is really startling. We work a lot in the space of education and 21st century education. There are very strong indicators that as jobs and employment opportunities are soaked up by artificial intelligence and robots, one area where jobs are really expanding and there is no foreseeable crisis is in the creative economy sector. Human beings will need to be entertained, and this is the space where I think there won't be a challenge. The kind of shrinkages we are witnessing in engineering or in medicine or in law or in accountancy, creative industries is relatively safe from those kind of shocks of technology. British Council has worked very closely with UNESCO across the world. There are three examples that our current research has come up with. We have worked with UNESCO closely in creating the National Cultural Industries Strategy in Vietnam. We have worked in Colombia together to create an Orange Economy document, which is basically Colombia's creative industries sector. And in Nigeria, we have worked closely with UNESCO to create the Creative Industries Fund. In India, a lot of our work in the cultural space is now being focused in the sector of capacity building and behind the scene skills development. We have just launched a 3-year program called Festivals of the Future. And this has two components, and Ananya, I'm really thankful to you for being part of the launch program here in Kolkata. So Festivals of the Future has two components. One is Festivals Connections, which looks at creating international connections between those working in the sector of festivals, and which is an incredibly important part of creative industries and cultural development. The other part of Festivals of the Future is Festivals Academy, where we work in upskilling individuals involved in the festival sector in addressing some of the gaps that were mentioned earlier today in terms of how do people market themselves, their skills in project management, in financial planning, in approaching sponsors and donors. So these are the kind of things we are trying to work in the festival sector to sort of join the dots. And Ananya, you mentioned very, very importantly that Bangla Natuk's work supports initiatives of the governments that you work with. And this is really startling in West Bengal. Minister Mitro mentioned the Bishwa Bangla shops. And as a consumer, I cannot tell you how brilliant these shops are. I mean, compared to what used to be earlier, walking into a Bishwa Bangla shop is like walking into any international quality shop on crafts. And I personally use a number of their things that they sell. I go to Bishwa Bangla shops to pick up things that I give to friends abroad. My particular favorite is Nolen Gur in a tube, which is a fantastic innovation, I think. British Council also works very closely with governments in the policy space and in the practice sphere. So we've been working very closely with the tourism department of West Bengal to support this whole idea of cultural tourism and responsible tourism that Bangla Natok also works in. So last year we created, working with the West Bengal tourism department, we put together an exhibition as part of Totally Thames Festival in London called Bengal's Durga. It was a photography exhibition displaying not just the visible part of Durga Puja festival, which is the idols and the pandals and the lights, but also things that happen behind the scenes in Durga Puja. How it's an inclusive festival, how it goes into whole aspects of idol making and linking the communities across faiths, and also the way, for instance, just one, the district of Kumartuli inside Kolkata, which creates most of these idols, how that ecosystem works. And we took a delegation from West Bengal to 14 cities in the UK and Republic of Ireland, making those connections with festival sector and the creative industries sector to inform West Bengal's approaches in that space. And as a result of that, I'm really happy to share that Queen Mary University of London and IIT Kharagpur has just recently been commissioned through an open call to create a full mapping of the Durga Puja festival in West Bengal. So they have identified 10 creative industry sectors. So this includes the more obvious ones that's sort of visible, that kind of tip of the iceberg that's visible around Durga Puja, which those of you who have not experienced Durga Puja, I really urge you to come and have a look and feel. It really is the world's largest public arts festival. So the kind of sectors that this project will map out, and I'll be really reaching out to Bangla Natok. I think the conversations have already started in terms of gathering the data. There will be the obvious ones on idol making and illumination artists and pandals and pavilions. But this research will go beyond that. Look at the tourism aspect of Durga Puja in terms of visitors data, in terms of room occupancy in hotels, in terms of ticketing for international and domestic tourists. We'll be looking at the food and beverage industry and that sector, the retail sector impetus that Durga Puja festival gets. And of course, the performances around Durga Puja. I mean, that is absolutely critical. Dr. Mitro mentioned very interestingly my organization, and I'm really was delighted at that mention that the work that we do with the West Bengal government in providing English language skills to the civil servants. So we've been working for the last 3 years, trained each new batch of West Bengal civil servants in ensuring that their English language skills are to a certain international level, and that really helps position the work of West Bengal globally, and we are responding directly to something that the Chief Minister herself expressed to us at a Bengal Global Business Summit. That is, in brief, a quick run-through of my perspective and my organization's perspective on this very, very important aspect on cultural development. Immediately after this, I'm off to Guwahati to launch the Festivals Academy project. So in the Northeast, we have really enhanced our presence, strengthened our programming, and made that programming a lot more sustainable in the field of culture and education. And in all of this, the kind of approach that we have taken in the Northeast, I have almost shamelessly borrowed and been inspired by the work that Bangla Natok has done in that space. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with Bangla Natok and UNESCO in all these spaces of activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chakraborty, for this very interesting presentation on the work which has been carried out by the British Council I think this is, we remain still in the subject of culture and development, while the rural cultural hubs addresses more in the area of intangible cultural heritage and craft. But then the British Council intervenes more in the creative industry and the creative sector. In light of this, I'd like to share 2 points with you. First of all, Mr. Chakraborty mentioned rapidly growing the creative industry internationally, and we know that India is not an exception. And then this leads us to the second point, that lack of data. India, although we all know that the creative sector is bustling and then growing very, very rapidly, I believe that the data and indicator is a great challenge for all of us, because we do not have internationally established this data and indicator, which will be very important for all of us to have a very clear picture where India is situated, for example, in the SDG 2030. And then also where we can also cooperate and then enhance our cooperation with the civil society and then government and then also the private and public sector. Because without indicator, whatever you assume, whatever we think this is a priority area, it can only be our assumption. So in this respect, the Queen Mary University's cooperation to create full mapping of Durga Puja is very important, and I hope that this will give us very good picture what is the the role, especially in the economy, of this Durga Puja, not only in Kolkata but maybe whole West Bengal. Exactly. So then UNESCO very much would like to share. If you can share with us the data, will be also very much the help for all of us. I believe that on this occasion, I really would like to state that in this data and the indicator level, I think the cooperation between institutes will be very important. So whatever, of course, from UNESCO side, the data we can have, we will also share with the Bangladesh.com and then, of course, British Council and all the stakeholders intervening in this area. So maybe you also would like to maybe share some of your comments or questions. So we will open the panel to the public. Is there anybody who would like to comment or question? How many time we have, Amitabha? 5 minutes, maybe 1 and 2 questions. Yeah, not many. I see none. So yeah, then maybe yes. Yeah, we are already behind the schedule, so we can close the debate. Thank you very much, Ananya and Mr. Chakraborty.